Just before I begin, I just want to make sure that you can see the presentation in front of you.
Yes.
Great, thank you. The subject property owners, they've applied to reduce the side yard setback from 1.5 meters to 0 meters. And this is to allow for a partial demolition and reconstruction of an existing shed. If the application is successful, the owners will proceed with a building permit, BP 2020-86D, to demolish, move, and reconstruct portions of the shed, and then also apply for a minor heritage alteration permit. The building permit and the heritage alteration permit are applications delegated to staff to approve and issue. So the staff recommendation that's in front of you here today is that the application be approved to reduce the minimum side yard setback from 1.5 meters to 0 meters. And should council not wish to support the staff recommendation, council can either deny the application, consider to amend it with conditions, or defer the application. The presentation that I'll go over today is just the background details of the property, public notification process, proposal details of the variance, the staff evaluation, and recommendation. The subject property is located at 301 4th Street East, and this is within the central Revelstoke neighborhood. It's approximately 348 meters squared, which is about 0.09 acres. It contains a single-family dwelling, carport, and shed. And the lot is currently serviced by municipal water, sanitary. It's zoned single and two-family residential district, which is R2 in the zoning bylaw. And it's designated in the OCP as duplex residential land use. It's T4L, and within the Revelstoke Station Heritage Conservation Area. And the property is currently surrounded by developed residential properties. A bit of background about the shed that you're looking at today. In 2019, the subject property owner demolished an existing shed that was in this location you see in the picture today. The picture is of the current shed. So they demolished the shed and rebuilt a new shed on the existing foundation without first applying for the applicable city permit applications. And in April 2020, the city received a complaint notifying staff of the reconstructed shed. At this time, staff confirmed that the shed had been built within the side yard setback of the R2 zone and was encroaching onto the neighboring property. This is by 0.26 meters. The staff informed the property owner that the newly constructed shed required a building permit as was over the 10 meters squared, a development variance permit as it's within the setback, and a minor heritage alteration permit as it's in the heritage conservation area. Staff outlined options to the property owner to resolve the bylaw contravention and to bring it into compliance. And some of these options outlined to the property owner were to apply to demolish the shed, apply to relocate the shed, or submit the required city applications requesting approval of the shed's existing location. As the application seeks to vary the requirements set forth in the zoning bylaw, landowners within 100 meters of the subject lands have been provided notice. This is in accordance with the Local Government Act. And 66 properties are captured in the 100-meter notification area. And the property owners or tenants of the land had until 1 p.m. today to provide written submission to the city if they feel like their property is affected by the proposed application. Staff have received 2 written submissions. These are an objection to the requested variance to 0 meters, and they're attached to the staff report in the council agenda package. A bit about the proposal. The application seeks to vary the requirements of the R2 zone to reduce a side yard setback from 1.5 to 0 meters, and this would allow for the reconstruction of the existing accessory building. The property owner has provided a summary outlining the rationale and has also provided a letter of support from the adjacent property owners who are the most directly impacted by the location of the shed. And both these letters are attached to the council report. So what you see in front of you is the area crossed by blue, A, is to remain but be moved farther back off the property line. And the section B, which is in the red there, is to be demolished under the current demolition permit that they have with the city right now. They would be reducing the building size to a 9.62 meters squared building from the existing building that's 15.42 meters squared. So staff have evaluated the application and are supportive of the variance. The property owner has applied to improve the siting of the existing shed. They've applied for a demolition permit to remove a portion of the shed and move the shed completely back onto their property. The property owner has worked with staff to bring the shed into compliance with the zoning bylaw and the building bylaw, and the proposal will comply with all other applicable sections of the zoning bylaw. The neighboring property owner who is directly impacted by the shed has submitted a letter of support. This is both for the demolition portion and the requested variance. And as a condition of the variance, the owners must construct the siding of the shed using non-combustible material, and this is included in the permit that's attached to the council package. So staff recommend that the application be approved. If council is supportive of the staff recommendation, the resolution in front of you here on the screen can be considered, and the owner will be able to proceed with their building permit and heritage permit alteration applications. And should council wish to not support staff recommendation, as I mentioned before, you can consider deny the application, consider to amend it with conditions, or defer the application. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Ms. Hartling. So council, can I have one of the councillors to put the motion on the table? So Councillor Elliott, you have your hand up electronically. Do you have a question, or is it just from before?
It was from before, Gary, but I'm just curious. I can't see anybody on my screen here. Is there some button I'm missing, or just
go up to the three dots at the top,
yeah,
and hit that, and then hit large gallery.
I'm not seeing that either. Okay.
So there should be a button that says, or has, looks like two people, and then a round circle, then a hand up, and then beside that, three dots. Do you have that at the top of your screen?
I got three dots. Yep.
So hit the three dots.
Yep.
And then partway down, does it say large gallery preview after you've hit the three dots?
It says show device settings, show meeting details, exit full screen. That's it. Keypad.
So maybe exit full screen and just see if you get to see everybody then.
Now I've tried that, Gary.
Okay.
Anyway, I'll just go with this, but yeah, I'm just not seeing anyone.
Okay, that's not good. So gallery or large gallery should be able to see.
Yeah.
And you're not even seeing those directions?
No.
Okay. So I'll get one of the staff to try and assist you here. Hang on a sec. Okay.
They can do it on the chat, Gary.
Okay. All right. I'll get somebody to send you a chat. All right. Can I get a councillor to put this motion on the table, please? Councillor Charlotte.
Sure. The development variance permit, DVP 2020-15 at 301 4th Street East, Parcel A, C15818I of Lot 1, Block 40, Section 27, Township 23, Range 2, west of the 6th Meridian, Kootenay District, Plan 636B, to reduce the minimum side yard setback requirement from 1.5 meters to 0 meters for an accessory building, be approved.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Brooks-Hill. Any discussion or questions for Ms. Hartling regarding this? The way I understand it is that this was put up and it is across the property line. So already on the neighbor's property, they are wanting to amend this and bring it back so it conforms and is on their property, and that the neighbor whose property it is on is in agreement with that, and it doesn't affect any of the other neighbors in the area. Is that correct, Ms. Hartling?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
All right. Any comments or questions, councillors? Councillor Brooks-Hill.
Just a sort of general comment. I'm not really in favor of 0 meter setbacks, but given the circumstances that it was an existing structure that was then replaced, etc., and the neighbor's okay with it, I'm going to support this amendment or this development variance permit.
Thank you. I appreciate that comment, and I feel the same way. Councillor Palmer, you have your hand up.
So just for clarification, based on Councillor Brooks-Hill's comment that this was an existing building, it's my understanding that this is a recent build. When was the construction?
Ms. Hartling?
Through your worship, it was constructed after they demolished it in 2019. I don't know the exact date range it took them to put it up, but it was demolished in 2019 and became aware to city staff in 2020.
So it was in 2019, and then there was a complaint in 2020. So this is very recent. I understand where staff is coming from. I think on this, I think it's a difficult one. This is what I would call AF variance, and AF variance after ask for forgiveness. And so I have a series of concerns, Mayor Sulz. One is, are we sending a message that it's okay to build without a permit? And these are just questions. I don't actually need answers to these, but these are questions I think others. And is it okay for people in our city to ignore the bylaws? And are we sending a message that it's okay to do whatever we feel like? And if you get caught, just ask for forgiveness. And so I think those are some of the questions. Our community is, there's illegal structures all over. Some of them are more recent. Some of them go back decades ago that would be non-conforming. And it's because this is very recent. This has to be reconstructed. So I'm just saying, boy, they have to rip down a big portion of it. And then there's the question about setbacks. And again, I would agree with Councillor Brooks Hill that maybe we should be readdressing, looking at what's an appropriate setback. But I think the majority of residents that are living in residential areas, R1 and R2, would say that a zero setback is not appropriate. So even if this was okay, then should we not be changing the bylaw? Say it's okay for residents to build to a zero setback. I do have some other further concerns. One is with the zero setback, it's showing a sloped roof. It looks like it'll be shedding rain and possibly snow into the neighbor. And the neighbors are getting along today. That's great. However, future neighbors, is that going to be creating a conflict? Is it the right kind of construction for a zero setback? With those questions, and then we've had a couple of people that express concern about that. I think I will not be supporting this, and I think that it's setting a precedence. I know that staff would say, well, it doesn't set a legal precedence, but it certainly sends a political precedence that it's okay to do illegal construction. We're dealing with illegal issues around illegal vacation rentals, and we're not enforcing those aspects. But here we're actually almost encouraging people to say, you know what, if you want to do something, just build. Don't worry about getting the permit. And if you get caught, just deal with it later on. I think that's my comments, Mayor Sulz.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Appreciate your comment. So I just want to go back to Ms. Hartling and just confirm where we're at with this. So if this is not supported, does it mean that this gets to stay in the configuration it already is, or does it mean it has to be torn down and then they have to reapply and rebuild? So I need some clarification, maybe for the rest of us as far as council goes, but also for the community. Can you just elaborate on that, please?
Yes, Your Worship. So if this is not approved today, it would go back to bylaw enforcement if the owner was not to continue with a demolition permit for the full building, or apply to relocate it to meet the setbacks, or make another application. They have the option of making an application for a different variance to maybe a different setback and remove more of it, or they could also make an application through the Board of Variance if they feel like it's a hardship, but that's just that they might not be able to apply for that, but that's another way of an application. So they would have options to remove it as one of them, and then relocate it, it's one of them, or apply for a different variance are their options.
So by denying this to go forward doesn't force the homeowner to conform and bring it into our existing bylaws where they need to have that 1.5 meter setback. Am I correct in that? It doesn't force the issue.
Yes, that's correct. It would be, this was a bylaw enforcement issue, so we had worked with the property owner with bylaw enforcement. They were considering other options, but after talking to the neighbor, I understand that this was the options that they both felt were appropriate for that shed. So then they did come forward with a variance late in the fall. But yeah, if it wasn't approved, if they don't follow through with demolition, it would be bylaw enforcement action. Okay.
Any comments from any other councillors? I think Councillor Palmer has some prudent comments, and that's kind of why I'm asking what the implications are. Councillor Charlotte.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I have a couple of questions. It seems like when they rebuilt the shed, they more than or just about doubled the size of it from the previous building. And I'm wondering, because I agree, Councillor Palmer's comments are very pointed. And I have had similar concerns in the past as well. It's like we want to be careful what precedent we set. And if we want to apply these rules, we should change the rules for everyone, not cherry pick where it goes. I'm curious though about the cost of forgiveness versus the cost of permission. I'm wondering if anyone has an idea of is there a difference in that? Is it more expensive to ask for forgiveness and more efficient? So it's in the homeowner's best interest to apply appropriately before, because they're going to rack up extra bills afterwards. Because I know you do have to pay for these various permits, but I'm not as familiar with the costs.
Your Worship, did you want me to answer?
Please, sorry, I was muted. Yes.
So my understanding with the excuse me, the current fees bylaw is that there's not an increased fee with an after the fact application. That is something that's available to local government, to have an after the fact fee that dings, as you're talking about property owners or developers that build something that without say a building permit or has bylaw enforcement action, they would have an increased fee. Typically, this is, in my past experience, I've seen it double, but I'm not familiar or aware of any changes to the city bylaws, but that is something as a tool available to a municipality.
Okay, and that would be Your Worship, I imagine that would be something we would discuss as part of the fees and charges bylaw discussion?
I believe so.
Okay, interesting.
Ms. Wade, you have your hand up. Do you want to make a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to clarify a few things. One, development variance permits are a one-off. They do not set precedents. So I wanted to clarify that. They're to be done on a case-by-case basis. We do acknowledge that in some cases we do have areas in the city that require revision, and we have already said that we will be coming back and dealing with some of these residential zones and commercial zones in regards to the zoning bylaw update, which will be coming forward to council with the housekeeping matters that we need to attend to. The other thing is that this was a compliance issue of which the applicant worked with city and the neighbor to bring this into compliance, and that the city normally doesn't get involved in property to property owner situations. So it's up to the two individual property owners to resolve the issue. And if the other property owner is comfortable with what is being proposed with the zero lot line, then that is where it falls. The city doesn't get involved in that legal discussion. And zero lot lines are not uncommon. Whether we want to promote them in residential zones is something that we will discuss as we go through all our zones and discuss those because it has an effect on housing density. But that isn't the conversation that we're having today. We were simply trying to bring forward a development variance permit to deal with the compliance issue that is between two property owners, and it's been resolved. And I just wanted to clarify those facts.
Thank you. Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, thank you. That makes good sense, because as much as we don't want to incentivize the wrong behavior, we also do want to bring more properties into compliance rather than having all these non-conforming builds around. So I appreciate that the neighbors are getting along on this and hearing about the discussion about zero setbacks in the upcoming zoning bylaw discussions. I like that we're getting all this housekeeping done. It's good. I think that finishes my questions for now. Thank you.
All right. Councillor Palmer, do you have your hand up again?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple other points. This is in the heritage area. And if I'm understanding correctly, so there's a heritage alteration permit also required. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, that's correct.
So just on that point, this does not seem to me something that would be a permit that would be normally be given for a heritage alteration, and that it's not in keeping with the heritage character of the community. Just a point on the cost of the AF variance, ask for forgiveness variance is cheaper if they don't get caught, because there's no cost whatsoever, especially when the implications after the fact, the cost of getting caught is minimal. The other aspect to that is the staff cost, even the cost of the council time on dealing with these properties. And this is not like the ones that were built 10 years ago. This was a recent thing, and within a year's period or less, it would appear. 2019, it was built. 2020, there's a complaint. I don't know how many months there was in there, but this is a right away kind of thing. And so, the more I think about this, I think it is strongly sending the wrong message. And from a message to the community, yes, not legal precedents as far as variances are. I agree and understand with the Director of Development Services on that, but it is sending a message that it's okay to do this kind of thing. And if we look at the tests, when is the right time for variance? Like we've had a few of them already since I've been on council. There's been a few already, particularly up in Johnston Heights. And so I think that message continue it, do as you feel like and fix it later, you'll get what you want. And if you compare it to that, if they went through the proper process, is this something that the city would have approved or encouraged before the construction if they said, okay, we would like a variance with a zero setback? I think the answer to that is no. That this is, if the neighbor down the street, a block away, asked for the exact same kind of thing, we would say no. And so I don't think this is fair to the neighboring communities. I think the people that have been bravely sent letters to the city saying we're in opposition to that, I think that we owe it to the broader community. That's my comments, Mayor Sulz.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Any other comments from councillors? So you've kind of heard both ways of thinking, and I can't fault Councillor Palmer on his thought that it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it asks for permission. The city staff has worked to bring this into something that the neighbor would support. That doesn't mean that, as Councillor Palmer said, that the neighbors in the future are going to be happy with this. And then if we deny it, are they going to go through all kinds of red tape to get to the Board of Variance and to bring it to them? So I'm going to ask the question, those who are in support of this basically is moving the setback to 0 for the accessory building. Before I do that, I see Ms. Hartling, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just with one of the points that Councillor Palmer made, the relocation of the shed is to allow the neighboring property owner to build their fence. So they will not have the snow from the roof line of the shed falling onto the neighboring property, just to clarify that.
Okay, thank you for that comment. All right, going back to this, those who are in favor, if you raise your hand, you're allowing that to be at 0. And so I'm going to ask that question. All those in favor of the motion on the table. So I am seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, including me, opposed. Councillor Palmer, note Councillor Palmer opposed. Everyone else in favor. So this motion is carried to move this setback to 0 meters for this accessory building. All right, let's move on to item 5B. We have a presentation. Ms. Hartling, are you bringing that forward? Mr. Simon.
I believe Mr. Simon is, Your Worship.
All right, Mr. Simon.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we have another development variance permit application before council today. This is DVP 2020-16. It is an application to vary city bylaws to allow direct access onto a side street, in this particular circumstance being 5th Street. So staff are in support of the variance. The variance specifically is seeking to amend zoning regulations to allow direct access from 5th Street as opposed to the laneway. The zoning bylaw does require access to be from the lowest form of roadway, and in this case, that would be the laneway. So a variance is needed to those regulations. In addition, a variance is also needed to subdivision servicing and development bylaw number 1846. The schedule within the servicing bylaw does have regulations that again require residential driveway access to be from the lowest form of roadway. And in addition to that, for corner lots, it has minimum distances between the access point and a lane intersection. And in that case, it needs to be 7 meters. And the owner is requesting a variance for that minimum distance from 7 meters to 3.77 meters. So we can get into some more specifics. I'll give you some details about the property itself, details on the public notification process, because this is a development variance permit, as council is aware. Go into some further details on the proposal and review the site plan that the applicant has prepared, conclude with the staff evaluation and reiterate the recommendation. So the property is located at 603 Mackenzie Avenue, as previously indicated. You can see it is the area that is highlighted here in red on the zoning map. It is zoned residential 2. It is a corner lot. It's located right at the junction of 5th Street and Mackenzie Avenue. It is surrounded by predominantly residential properties. You'll see the property adjacent to 5th Street on the other side does hold the downtown fringe commercial zoning designation. However, it is developed for residential purposes currently, and it does fall within the Revelstoke Station Heritage Conservation Area, similar to the previous application. So because this is a development variance permit under the Local Government Act, we are required to send out notification to property owners. In this case, it's within a 100-meter radius of the subject lands. There were 68 property owners that were provided this notification. Staff did not receive any letters in support or opposition of the variance. So getting into some more specific details of the proposal, this is the site plan that was provided by the applicant. You can see the property backing onto the alleyway and then also fronting onto 5th Street and Mackenzie Avenue. The applicant has submitted an application to vary regulations to allow for direct access onto 5th Street here, as opposed to being provided access from the alleyway. And again, as previously indicated, the subdivision and servicing bylaws, as well as the zoning bylaw, does require access to be from the lowest form of roadway, hence why a variance is needed to permit it from Fifth. So when we're looking at this and we're looking at the policies that guide staff in evaluating this, part of it looks at what the other properties on the block are actually doing from an access perspective. So you can see the property immediately adjacent does have access from the laneway. When we move a little bit further down, the property highlighted in yellow here does actually have direct access from Mackenzie Avenue as well as the laneway. And then the property at the end of the block here has access from the laneway. When we're looking at a property on the other side of Fifth Street, they do have direct access from Fifth Street here as well. So that kind of gives council an idea of the surrounding development context. And when staff are evaluating this, we did ultimately determine that we, in this particular circumstance, were supportive of the variance for the following reasons. When you look at the policies as contained within the official community plan, specifically being Appendix 4, which gives staff guidance for development within the heritage area, there are provisions in there that do address access. And there is a specific reference in Appendix 4 that does discuss properties that are fronting onto Mackenzie Avenue, and that access should be from side streets where available. The current state of the laneway does make access during the winter challenging, and council will note in the staff report there is an image of the current status or current state of the laneway. Fifth Street is a dead-end road, and the policies to require access from the lowest form roadway are really meant to ensure a managed traffic flow on our main arterial and collector roadways within the city. Because this one is running onto Fifth Street at a portion that ultimately dead ends, it really is reserved for local traffic to use, and it's not envisioned as a high traffic area. Therefore, in this particular circumstance, staff do not see a major impact in terms of impeding traffic flow. And then in addition, when we're looking at that reduced offset, so that requirement that requires a 7-meter offset from the laneway to the edge of the proposed driveway. And again, just to remind council, the applicant seeking to reduce that to 3.77 meters. This has been reviewed with the city's engineering services team. And in this particular circumstance, given the low volume of travel on both Fifth Street and the laneway, it was determined that a 3-meter offset would be appropriate. And in this particular case, they're at 3.77 meters. So staff do not feel that there's any safety concerns in terms of sight lines, given the location of the proposed access and the location of the laneway. Oh, thank you. That does conclude the presentation. And what I have on the board here is the proposed resolution. Again, staff being supportive of the proposed variance. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. To move this forward, I'm going to ask for a councillor to put this on the table. Mr. Simon, do we want to do this in two sections because there's a zoning bylaw and then a development and servicing bylaw? How do you feel?
Through your worship, corporate services can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it should all be part of the same resolution because it is one council resolution. All
right, thank you for that. Is there a councillor that wants to put this on the table? Councillor Brooks Hill.
The development variance permit DVP 2020-16 be approved at 603 Mackenzie Avenue as seen on the screen in the package.
Great, thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Elliott. Any further discussion or questions for Mr. Simon, council? I'm in support of this. I think because of all of the reasons that Mr. Simon has stated, where it's located, the roadway and the ability, it's easier to get to that piece of property from Fifth Street than it is from the alley. Councillor Palmer, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Yes, I'm in support of this. And contrary to the previous one, this checks all the right boxes for a good development variance permit in that it's recognizing the heritage. It's not asking for forgiveness. It's consistent with some policies. It's something that would be done elsewhere. So this just checks all those boxes. One question I do have, and I don't see it as a big deal, but it's the width of the driveway seems very wide for a residential. Again, I think I probably would be supportive even with that, but with a 20-foot, is that an unusually large driveway for those 4 parking stalls, or is it reasonable? Just looking at the drawing that figure 3, I think it is. Figure 3, the site plan.
Mr. Simon?
Through your worship, the subdivision servicing bylaw sets a maximum driveway width of 6 meters, but that would be 6 meters at the property line. So in terms of an owner wishing to have it tapered to be a little bit wider once it's on their property, the major item that is concerning staff there is we want to make sure that the character doesn't just turn it into a giant parking lot. So there is some landscaping on the property that will be retained. And we also look at it from a drainage perspective. And that's something that engineering staff would look at to see if, a little site drainage plan is required. Should council approve the variance, there's a driveway permit that the applicant would retrieve from us.
Awesome. Thank you very much. That's great.
Any other councillors with comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Note that the motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Simon. Moving on to item 5C. We have a presentation for that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So again, we have another development variance permit application. This time it is again seeking to vary zoning and subdivision and servicing bylaw requirements to allow direct access from 4th Street East. This is for a property located at 305 4th Street. So in this circumstance, as shown on the board here, staff are not supportive of the proposed variance. The applicant has submitted an application to again vary zoning regulations, which do require access to be from the lowest form roadway. And again, varying the requirements of the subdivision development and servicing bylaw, which again includes regulations to require access from the lowest form roadway. So to get into some details, we'll look at the subject property itself. Again, it's a variance permit, so there is a requirement for public notification. We'll get into some details based on the plans that the applicant had provided and conclude with the staff evaluation and reiterate the recommendation. So the property is located at 305 4th Street East, as indicated previously. You can see it's right along 4th Street, which is a collector roadway, and Arthur Avenue. We have Bobson Avenue on the other end of the block. It is zoned single and 2-family residential district. You can look at surrounding properties that are zoned R2 as well. In this particular case, it's not a corner lot. It is a mid-block property. And again, this application does fall within the Revelstoke Station Heritage Conservation Area. So in this particular circumstance, again, because it is a variance, staff are required to send notification letters to property owners within vicinity of the lands. There were 107 property owners that did receive notification of this variance application. There were no letters in support or opposition that were received to staff. So getting into some specifics of the proposal, again, the variance is seeking to allow access directly from 4th Street as opposed to the laneway. The laneway in this circumstance would be considered the lowest form roadway. So on the left here, you can see this is the existing parking configuration, which is taking up the predominant space in the rear yard of the property. And the applicant is proposing to have access directly onto 4th Street for 1 parking stall. And they will get into it, but they would be looking at using turf stone materials as indicated in the staff report that do help with increasing permeous surface on the property. So again, similar to the previous application, when staff are looking at these, in addition to the policy, it is important to understand the surrounding development context. So the policy does really focus on properties on the block in Appendix 4 of the OCP. So when we look at the surrounding properties on this block, the property immediately adjacent at the corner here does have existing laneway access, as well as the property on the other side. I will note that there are some properties that are more mid-block that have access directly onto 4th Street. 317 here actually does have 2 accesses that both front onto 4th Street. And then this corner lot at 321 has direct access from Robson Avenue, which is kind of to the southeast of the property. So as indicated, the owner has submitted a letter in support of their variance that is included in the agenda package for council. The general rationale that the applicant has provided in that letter is indicating that this would help them reclaim a lot of the private space in the rear of their property, and they wouldn't have to have it dedicated for parking. And that as part of this, they would be looking at using turf stone materials. There's an example of that provided in the council report. They would be looking at doing this to help maintain the aesthetics of the neighborhood, as well as increase or reduce the impervious surface that comes along with having standard paved driveways. So it does help with on-site drainage. So staff, I would note as well that, at driveway permit stage, should council ultimately decide to approve this variance, staff would be able to enforce that requirement for the turf stone material. So as indicated at the onset of the presentation, staff are not supportive of the proposed variance. In this particular circumstance, when we look at the policy in the OCP for mid-block properties within the heritage area, it does support laneway access. So staff would be supportive of maintaining the current access arrangement. 4th Street is a through collector roadway and does experience higher traffic volumes than other side streets or dead-end roadways, and allowing direct access does contribute to reducing traffic flows. And it's one of those concerns where, individually any one access point might not have a noticeable impact, but cumulatively, there's going to be an impact if there's multiple access points onto these collector roadways. And another point to be aware of is that the newly constructed roundabout at Townley, 4th and Victoria is about 300 meters from the property. And again, so it becomes even more critically important to maintain reduced access points onto those roads that lead to this recent infrastructure improvement to ensure that we have efficient movements to and from this traffic circle. So again, just to reiterate, staff are not supportive of the variance, and the recommended resolution from staff is on the screen for council. I would note that there are alternative options. Council can choose to defer a decision on the development variance permit and request further information. They can also choose to approve the development variance permit for the requested variances that are on the screen. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Appreciate that. Is there a councillor that, Ms. White, do you still have your hand up from before, or you want to make a statement before we start?
If I could just make a statement before we start?
Yes, please.
To your worship, I just wanted to note that there was one letter of opposition that was received, and I just wanted to bring that to council's attention. And it was from a resident of 4th Street within 100 meters, but no name on it.
Great, thank you for that comment. Is there a councillor that would like to put the motion on the table that is in your package? Anyone want to put that on, or is there someone who would like to support? Councillor Palmer, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think none of us want to read the long resolution. Just curious, I'll read it out, but it varies from community to community on the reading. Is that required, or can I just make a motion that as written by staff to deny the application?
You can make that motion.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm just going to cut in here, Councillor Palmer, just because it is on the screen in a recommendation, you can say as in the package or on the screen. you do not have to read the whole thing, but just so that the public understands that it is a denial. That's all.
Perfect. Yeah. So this is as is on the screen and in the package. I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Charlotte, you're seconding that motion. Okay. Any questions or comments on the motion or from the presentation Mr. Simon has just given us? I think, Councillor Charlotte, do you have your hand up? I'm reading across the bottom of the scene. You want to make a comment?
Yes, please. Looks like Councillor Elliott and Councillor Palmer as well.
Okay.
I second this motion just to get some discussion going on this. I'm not sure I'm in support of denying it. As much as I appreciate staff's comments and the cumulative effect of access onto the main roads, I also see that in this area with these laneway, the laneway access, as it were, at some point we're going to be talking about carriage homes and density and splitting off. It's going to have some major impacts in the future as well. I'm curious, I have a question though. I'm curious as to the owner in their letter had mentioned quite a few other properties with laneway access. And I'm wondering if all of those properties have permission for that access, or not laneway access, 4th Street access. And I'm wondering what our enforcement looks like on that.
Mr. Simon, I'm going to ask you, because these are inexistent, are they automatically grandfathered in the other places that have had them there for years? If you could make a statement or even answer Councillor Charlotte's question.
Yep, for sure. Through your worship, thank you. In terms of, whether or not properties are considered to be lawful non-conforming with historic developments, it's always on a case-by-case basis, and it's always dependent on when it was constructed and what the bylaws at that time of construction were. So it's hard to say without actually, it takes quite a deep dive actually from staff to really determine if any one particular circumstance is considered lawful conforming. I will note that I can't speak historically how much dedication there's been for enforcing individual driveway accesses, but staff are doing as best as we can to try and enforce and educate, informing the public about what the regulations and the rules are, and to inform them of the process that they would need to go through currently if they are seeking to pursue an access configuration that is contrary to city bylaws.
Councillor Elliott, you have your hand up.
Yes, Gary, thank you. The street itself is particularly wide. It seems like our downtown core areas have particularly wide streets. Is that right, Paul?
Yep, through your worship, that is correct. It is a wider road because this is an identified collector roadway in our official community plan.
Mm-hmm. And just looking at it, I know driving by that area there that all the homes along that have the access through the laneway seem to have some additions or new modifications put onto the houses. So it seems like they're adding either a rental suite or more living space in the back alley and using the laneway which as access. We're trying to solve some housing issues, and laneway housing are an obvious target we can go towards. Are we creating something if we can't allow parking in the front?
Through your worship, just one comment, and Miss Wade may want to add on to this. When we have applications that are coming in right now, staff have to evaluate them based on the current policy framework. That being said, it will be a separate discussion when staff are bringing forward zoning bylaw regulations to look at different development forms such as carriage houses to see how that is going to impact our current access configuration regulations. Staff are acutely aware that those need to be examined, and we are kind of right in the meat of that right now as we are looking at our zoning bylaw in depth. But I just want to make sure that we're keeping the conversations appropriately separated to make sure that we're focusing on what's before council today.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Simon. Any other comment, Councillor Elliott, before I go to Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, just 4th Street doesn't seem any busier. I mean, I know we back out on the Mackenzie Avenue on certain instances. Just generally, I don't find that as a we're arguing. But I look at the houses across the street. None of them have parking at the front, and yeah, and there's 2 or 3 on the same side that do have parking access from the 4th Street, but the majority of them come from the laneway. So it's kind of a mixed parking scenario on that street. So I'm just trying to weigh that.
Great, thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. Oh, glitchy. Here, am I still on? Yeah, thanks.
Yes.
So yeah, a couple of comments. I am supportive of the denial or the motion as it's and for as the reasons that were outlined in the report. I'm a little surprised actually that the fire department didn't weigh in a little bit heavier on this as well, with it being an arterial route. And one question I would have is on the driveway. So they'll be required a driveway permit separate from this. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yes. If there is going to be any accesses, staff are encouraging property owners to get driveway permits through our engineering services group, and it just makes sure that they are done in accordance with engineering servicing requirements to address things like site drainage. Okay,
and so is part of that sight lines, because again, this is an arterial, and the proposed location of that driveway seems like it may be interfering with best practices as far as arterial roads. So someone backing out into that and in the proximity of the side street. So this is a little bit different if it was in the middle of the street. So I'm wondering if it would be the driveway permit would be denied based on that basis, and you don't necessarily need to answer that. The other thing one thing that I see missing a little bit, there was a lot of comments about the driveways or lack of driveways on the same side, but equally important is what is happening on the other side of that street, as well as the broader area. I think it would be a big mistake for council to accept this because of the arterial. And perhaps the director of engineering might want to weigh in. But if this is intended as an arterial, we need to protect that long-term interest for the community. Yes, it might be not that busy today and probably would be fine, but are we starting to create more problems for a future? So this has been a long time been determined as or identified as an arterial, and that's, I think maybe if this was on another street would be quite supportive of it possibly, but because of the arterial status. And then even on the width of the road, Councillor Elliott was talking about the width of the road, yeah, someday we might be wanting to still as an arterial bring that in, but then that starts to create whether there's a boulevard or how we do the treatments as we improve our city walkability, so you don't have the conflicts with pedestrians. Again, by having the a driveway going through there creates potential pedestrian conflicts. And then just addressing the laneway suites or carriage houses in the future, that is a very common practice, is to have a laneway access. And one way is to have that carriage house with the garages at the lower level. So that's very common, and it's fairly widespread in the downtown core, like in Kelowna and places like that. So again, I think it's important that the staff recommendation be supported. Thank you, Mayor Sulz.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. So I've driven down that street many times and lived a little further down on 4th Street. That street is congested with street parking. There's many homeowners who do park their vehicles on the street, even if they have laneway parking at the rear, especially during the summer months. And even if they do have some parking on driveways on their property, there may still be visitors and whatnot that are parking on 4th. So when you drive down there in the evening, it seems to be wall-to-wall cars on both sides of the street. Most of the homes across the street do not have access to 4th Street from their front yards. Most of them are laneway. So I could go either way on this, with the exception of the fact that you're within 50 feet of MacArthur Avenue, which does pose a bit of a problem as people are coming around the corner. Right now, it may not be busy. When we talk about the roundabout, had this been on the other side of 4th Street past the roundabout, I'd say absolutely no one should be parking on the street. They should all be parking in the back. But we're seeing people park on the street. So if we were to deny this, people could still park their cars on the street. They don't have to park on in the laneway. They just have the ability to access that. And so they have options one way or the other, whether it's parking on or parking on their property or parking on the street. So I'm going to ask if there are any other councillors that have comments. Councillor Brooks Hill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a little on the fence as well on this one. I appreciate staff's concerns and the existing rules in place, and Councillor Palmer makes some good points as well. My general feeling, 4th Street isn't as wide as 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Street. It's a narrower road there, and with the parked cars there, everyone's already driving a lot slower. I personally avoid driving down 4th Street because it's already more congested. And as the Director of Engineering has pointed out to me a number of times, people drive at the speed that they feel comfortable. And you don't feel comfortable driving very quickly on 4th Street because of all the parked cars. So, and the proponents have I would say, a compelling case for their reasons for wanting to have a private backyard, etc., with a dog and children, that fencing it off. So I think in the end I'm going to support this, but it's a hard one.
Any other councillors have comments? Councillor Elliott.
Just more a question, Your Worship. Just the driveway permit, is that a new requirement we've established, or because this is new for me? I haven't heard that before.
Okay, Mr. Simon, do you have comment on that?
Through your worship, when driveways are evaluated, 90% of the time it's going to be as part of a building permit application. This is for people that want to do it separate from that. It's a way that staff have formalized the review process, just so that when someone asks, I want to put in a driveway, what's the process? And kind of back to that previous conversation about education, staff had to have a process for them to go through to do that. So this is just a way to formally acknowledge that. But if it's part of a building permit, it's wrapped up in that review.
Okay. I mean, do you see that as a rigorous ordeal that people have to go through, or is not too onerous?
Through your worship, I believe the last driveway permit that the engineering services department issued took 2 days of confirming with an applicant. It's really a checks and balance process to make sure that that an applicant is doing something that's in line with our servicing bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councillor, any further comments? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the question. If you vote in favor of this, you are denying the application. So I'll ask the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Okay, so that makes 4 of us opposed. So that means we have denied this denial. Is that correct? Did I word it properly, Ms. Lowe? Now, do we want to put a motion on the table? Do we need to put, Councillor Palmer, you have your hand up? Oh, okay. Do we need to put a motion on the table to Councillor Palmer?
Sorry, just having trouble with the iPad. I would be very reluctant to put a motion for accepting this at this point, because I think there's some more implications that come around this. It doesn't require a tabling motion because there's no motion on the table, but I think I would like to put a motion to refer the application back for staff for further consideration.
Yeah,
that's my motion.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Elliott, all in favor, or anyone want to have a discussion on that first? Do you want to have a discussion or no? Okay, all in favor? Okay, we'll defer that back to staff for further information. All right, we're going to now move on to announcements from the mayor. Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, sorry, Your Worship. I just wanted to maybe add a bit more. I mean, if the current residents on 4th Street are predominantly parking on the street, taking the traffic off the street is a move towards better, clearer access for our fire department and traffic that goes as on the arterial route. So I'm not quite sure the argument makes sense the way I see it right now. If we're arguing for an arterial route and keeping the parking as it is, then it doesn't jive with not putting it onto the property. If the overall benefit of the arterial route is having a clear access, why not get the parking off the street?
Okay, thank you for that comment. I think did we already vote where it's going back to staff? Yes. Okay, so thank you for that comment. Okay, we're going to move on now. So announcements from the mayor. The only announcement that I have this week is related to vaccinations for COVID-19. The vaccination process is fairly well into it. I want to again thank Interior Health for going to the province on our behalf to have community-specific vaccines. We've asked the tough questions and all the things had to line up. But also I want to thank the physicians and nurses in our community who have come out in droves to help with the vaccination process so that we can get up to 500 people a day vaccinated. And we've been pretty good about those appointments being fulfilled. There has been some glitches with the website, the provincial website, and with Interior Health. And so I just say to people, if you have some issues, send me an email, get a hold of me. I've been going to Interior Health and they've been asking me to come to them on a regular basis if there's issues where people can't get booked or aren't getting through. So I'm hoping that we can have those who want to be vaccinated in our community completed by month's end. And so they've got the vaccines ready for us. So I just encourage everyone who wants a vaccine to take Interior Health in the province up on that. It's free. Book it, get it. It's going to help towards us opening up our communities as we move forward. Thank you for that. We're going to now move on to delegations and presentations, and we have a tourism Revelstoke update, Ms. Meghan Tabor. And so Meghan, are you on here?
Yeah. Can you see me?
I can. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Your Worship. I will share my screen.
All right.
Is that up for everyone today?
It is. Thank you.
Okay, great. So hi, everyone. Thank you for giving us time to present to you today. I know most of you, but I'm Meghan Tabor, and I'm the Marketing and Destination Director for Tourism Revelstoke. And I also have Peter Nielsen here with me as chair of our board. And there are quite a few slides to get through today, so I will probably bypass some of them since you've all had the chance to look at them prior. There are really three key things that I'm hoping to accomplish with this presentation today. One, I'm hoping to educate you on who we are and what we do, so that if you're asked on the street by anyone about what's happening with tourism in Revelstoke, you can confidently answer them. Two, I'm hoping that you leave knowing that tourism economically is a top industry for Revelstoke. We punch above our weight class on so many different levels across the province in notoriety, media attention, digital marketing, MRDT, and DMO recognition. We have an unusual relationship where we're really tightly coupled with economic development in the Chamber of Commerce, but it's working. But our tourism industry is extremely fragile right now, and it will not recover by itself. And the last thing is, I'm hoping that you leave today with an understanding that we do have Revelstoke's best interest at heart. And you'll notice on the slide deck, there are many facts and figures about bringing people here to Revelstoke. And while marketing is a key focus area for us, we really do care about balance. And when we look at council priorities, our work is actually in alignment and directly supporting your first three. Livability is linked to our interest in regulating short-term rentals, as well as the online accommodation platform funding. In terms of infrastructure, the MRDT revenues drive many build projects through the RMI funding stream. And in terms of sustainability, we're supporting this priority through sustainable tourism initiatives and the proper protection of our unique community. So this was included on the pre-circulated infographic. I won't go into details on this slide. I will just mention that Tourism Revelstoke is a nonprofit destination marketing organization that's governed by the Revelstoke Accommodation Association with input from the Revelstoke Tourism Advisory Committee. I do just want to draw your attention to one of the stats on this slide, that 3.2 million is the annual tax revenue that comes into the city of Revelstoke from just the hotel sector. And this makes up about 10% of the entire city budget. Our mission is to inspire target visitors to explore and experience Revelstoke, and our vision is to successfully facilitate the development of a unique four-season destination while protecting the integrity of our community. We have 4 key focus areas: marketing, stakeholder relations and support, destination development, and advocacy. We implement a variety of tactical marketing initiatives, and I've listed a high-level overview on the slide. But equally important as marketing is working with and supporting our stakeholders. We provide monthly newsletters, offer opportunities for businesses to tap into our marketing assets, upskill businesses through meetings and workshops, and engage with the sector at multiple touchpoints throughout the year. Sustainability is also a key focus area for us. We care about balance, and we're working towards a destination development plan to ensure that we're keeping the integrity of the community at the top of mind through our efforts. And then finally, under advocacy, we advocate locally, regionally, provincially for issues that are really impacting the tourism industry here. A quick refresher on our brand pillars, because everything that we do falls under at least one of these pillars. So adventure, authenticity, nature, and heritage. And I also wanted to provide a refresher on our destination tourism strategy planning priorities, which include a year-round destination, a multi-day stay, a recognizable destination brand, long-term tourism planning, exceptional visitor servicing and remarkable visitor experiences, annual tactical marketing plans, visitor access, and financial stability. The tourism industry is extremely fragile right now. By any measure on this slide, you can see how impacted we were in 2020. And each closure throughout 2021 has been more and more damaging. So in 2020, we were down 65% in visitation to the visitor center, down 29% in MRDT overall, down 41% in online accommodation platform MRDT, and down 24% in average occupancy. So this slide shows an overview of MRDT collections since inception. And if we continued into 2021, MRDT is down over 50% for this winter season. This is a reminder that tourism is BC's biggest industry, bringing in $22.3 billion in total tourism annual revenue and being the highest performing resource industry for the GDP at $8.7 billion. We currently have no hard data on the tourism economy piece here, so we've begun determining the value of tourism in Revelstoke through Destination BC's various modeling programs. This is our first step in a baseline metric for our destination management strategy, and we should have results from part 1 of this study by the end of the month. So 2020 was an extremely challenging year for the tourism industry, but we did see a glimmer of light throughout the summer months. Our summer marketing campaign focused on safety, bookable experiences, and lengthening stays, generating 11.7 million leads and 1.4 million in revenue for stakeholders. Our new website saw over 330,000 page views. Our Revy Rules campaign was actually a catalyst for many other safety campaigns across the province. Our mask up video saw over 20,000 views, and our landing pages saw a combined total of just shy of 10,000 views. According to Destination BC, we were the top performer for impressions in the month of July and August with our Revy Rules story. We also knew how important it would be to support our stakeholders this past summer. So we ran bookable experience ads for 7 local providers, reaching 1.8 million and resulting in just shy of 1,500 click-throughs to activity providers. Finally, to encourage direct bookings and drive length of stay, we partnered with Revelstoke Mountain Resort and the Revelstoke Golf Club. Our Ride the Pipe for Free campaign resulted in 1,600 ticket redemptions, and our golf campaign saw over 370 passes redeemed, resulting in over $23,000 in revenue for the golf club. This winter has been absolutely devastating for the tourism sector. Given the travel restrictions, we kept content focused on safety, educational pieces, and the history of Revelstoke. This connected visitors with our brand and actually performed extremely well, resulting in significant engagement throughout the winter and keeping us top of mind for future travel planning. Our 2021 strategy will see the launch of 4 main spring and summer campaigns when we're able to do so. The goal of these campaigns will be to drive length of stay and direct bookings. I encourage you to attend our April 15th stakeholder session to get a sneak peek into what we have in store for this summer, and that's this Thursday at 3 p.m. Along with summer marketing, we'll be taking a deeper dive into destination development planning and sustainable tourism, which I'll address on the next slide. And finally, we've partnered with Tourism Golden and Shuswap Tourism, receiving significant grant funding through Destination BC to launch our Kicking Horse Canyon campaign. Our ultimate goal is to create a balanced long-term tourism approach that's rooted in stakeholder engagement, digital excellence, and shared community values. We will work to unite visitors, residents, and stakeholders to set the stage for tourism as a force for good. We really do care deeply about this place. We all live, work, and play here, and we definitely want it to remain intact and healthy for future generations. We're currently working with the City of Revelstoke's Economic Development Department on a value of tourism study, and a contractor has been hired to pave the way for our destination development plan. So we've not forgotten about the potential to apply for a 3% MRDT, but we've been patiently waiting for short-term rentals to get regulated. Once we get the short-term market under control, we'll be able to know their contribution, include them in the matrix, and have a better idea of whether or not our visitor market can actually support the 3%. We'll be starting the process with you this summer. And I've included some additional 3% slides for your reference, but I won't go through them today, just in the interest of time. So yeah, we really do value our relationship with City Council. I've included this handy list as a reference point for how you can become more engaged with us. And really, if there's ever a point where you feel like we're out of line with what you're trying to accomplish, please do reach out to us directly with any questions or concerns. Through a conversation together, we can better address any challenges that relate to the tourism industry. We're really happy to connect with you on more than just an annual basis. So I hope that after this presentation, you leave with a better understanding of who we are, what we do, and where our focus is. I hope that you acknowledge tourism as a key part of our community and our economy and how fragile it is right now. And finally, my hope is that when you get asked what your view on tourism is in town, it's that you support us because you're comfortable knowing that we have a solid strategy in place and that we're on track to have the right balance of sustainability and growth. And so I will now open up the floor to questions.
Meghan, I appreciate your comments and your presentation, and Peter for being here as well. I thank you for that. Councillor Palmer, you have your hand up. You have a question or a comment?
Yeah, thank you very much, Meghan. Great presentation, very clear, not too long. Hit all the main points. Really well done. Both the slides and your presentation were really well done. Thank you. And thank you very much for the work that Ra is doing. I think it's amazing. There's always little things that will have disagreements, but on perspectives. But I think that collaborative approach that you're having, the association with the economic development, with council and the city and where we're going is great. One of the things on tourism, from my own perspective is, if we do what is right for the people that live here, it just draws more and more people into our town. So, for those that don't like the tourism industry, then what you need to do is destroy our town and then they'll stop coming. But if we keep it really good for ourselves, that's just going to naturally draw more and more people into our community. And I think that's very exciting. The letter that was sent, there was some concerns about the vacation rentals, and you hit on it just briefly. And I'm a little bit confused on one thing. So it seems that there's two aspects, and this has to do with the proposed change to permit vacation rentals throughout all the residential zones in the city. And so there was a letter from Ra on that, and I understand the compliance part, and that you're very anxious to have those that are not conforming to the regulations, that we need an enforcement thing. And I agree and support that concept. The idea of opening up the city for all residential zones for vacation rentals, it seems to be in contradiction as to, for the accommodation, as to where it really makes sense. And I question that as an individual councillor. I've questioned that already. And I'm just not sure if the association, or if you're able to comment that on that aspect of that.
Happy to comment.
Peter, if you could just be brief, we're and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Sure. I will. I'll attempt brevity. You know, I think from one, compliance and is a really big issue for us. But to speak to specifically to the opening neighborhoods, I think where that, and I understand and share some concern around having it open to the whole city as well as far as location. But from the perspective that the resident being having a permanent resident as part of the property, I think from from association perspective is a enough of a limiting factor to really put almost a cap in place for how many properties are going to be in the rental market. That limiting factor is probably the biggest one from our perspective for effectiveness in putting some control in what is really an out of control industry in Revelstoke right now.
Okay.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Councillor Elliott, you have a comment?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple of things. You mentioned a meeting on April 15th at 3. What's the location on that?
So that's just on Zoom. So we've been running kind of monthly or bi-month, every couple of months, meetings with our tourism stakeholders where we outline everything that's going on in the industry, give them updates on what we've been up to, and just showcase what's coming down the pipes for tourism as well. And we'd love to have some city council representative on those calls, just so that you guys are in the loop as well in terms of what's going on with tourism in town. We do have our monthly RAW board meetings as well, so we'd love to have a new rep being designated to our board, because I just think it's really valuable to have somebody at the table on a consistent basis, so you guys understand what we're doing, where we're at with things, and you can bring that back to the rest of the council table as well.
Great, thank you. So, Councillor Elliott, just before you go on, we do have a committee of the whole meeting on the 15th at 2 p.m. and we will be coming forward with a councillor to sit on that. We'll have that all ratified at the next council meeting.
Gary,
go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yep.
Maybe Meghan, the impact of the highway closure. Do you guys, does the Tourism Revelstoke have a strategy, or you're developing a mechanism to get through this? And maybe what you're foreseeing is the impact on our community?
Yeah, I mentioned it very briefly in the presentation, just in the essence of time, but we do have a marketing strategy in place for the highway closure. We're lucky, well, lucky is a funny word, but right now, just with the Alberta lockdown and the pandemic, the highway's fully closed and they're getting a lot of work done in the next month or so. And then a key strategy for us will be just accurate communication moving forward that the highway is actually fully open during our prime tourist season. So we really don't want to be talking about closures necessarily, and more so verbalizing that the highway is open in our prime tourist season. And I think once we get people, checking Drive BC and understanding that there won't be any major closures during peak times, I think we'll see less of an impact. But it is still detrimental, but it's something that needs to be done, and it's kind of short-term pain for long-term gain.
And may I carry on, Gary? One more question. Hello?
Sorry, one more, Councillor Elliott, please.
Yeah, just 2020 had a decrease, maybe from a significant decrease in the revenue contribution generated from tourism. You said 50% decrease already from 21 to 20. Is that right?
Sorry, we're down 50% in January and February. So we were able to kind of compare pre-pandemic levels to this level. And so we're down about 50% in MRDT for January and February of this year.
So that's comparing to 2020, which was previously down from the year before. Is that right?
No, 2020 in January and February was actually really strong for us because it was pre-pandemic.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Elliott. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate your input and for being here today to do the presentation. We appreciate that and look forward to working together as we move on. Thank you again.
Thank you, Your Worship.
All right, Council, we're going to move on to 11A staff reports. We have a presentation from Development Services UBCM grant for emergency shelter.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. I don't have a presentation. It is a verbal presentation. And I just wanted to talk to the grant that we have put together. UBCM requires a resolution from council to submit this grant application, and then we'll have to go through a process and be reviewed. This is a great opportunity for us to be able to, one, work with Community Connections to secure a one-year contract for providing emergency shelter and helping with operations, doing research and outreach to the community. This dovetails nicely into the resolutions that council had done in August 15th, 2019, when we were looking at a temporary shelter. This one-year contract, should it be approved by UBCM, will allow us the opportunity to look at our needs in the community and also to do some engagement up in line with emergency shelters, how they operate, good neighbor policies, etc. And this also will allow us to inform our housing action plan. And part of the UBCM grant is that we look at what our next steps would be in regards to emergency shelter. So this will help to inform us and to look at the next step. I'm here with any questions, and so is Taha Atia, who was a great support in putting this together. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Councillors, do we want to put this motion on the table before we go to questions? So there's a councillor that would like to put the motion forward, please. Councillor Brooks-Hill.
The submission of a grant application to the Union of Municipalities, Union of UBCM, strengthening community services funding stream for a one-year emergency shelter pilot program operated by Community Connections Revelstoke Society be approved.
Is there a seconder for the motion, please? Councillor Charlotte. Any further discussion or questions for either Taha or Marianne? Councillor Charlotte.
Not really any questions, but just a comment that I'm excited to see this come forward. I think this is a great next step to get this emergency shelter in place hopefully for next winter. Is that the plan I remember reading in there? But I read through the application. It's quite thorough. I like all the different angles, especially the background that our collective impact process has been able to provide for starting to open up the conversation around this and to actually show the need with numbers, not just stories. So thank you very much for this. I'm glad to see it.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elliott.
Yes, Your Worship, I'm just curious. It seems like an extraordinary amount of money. It's great that we can get it. It seems like an awful lot of money for, maybe I'm trying to understand what we're getting for that. I mean, if we can get it, great, but I'm just curious.
Any comments, Ms. Wade or Mr. Ataya?
Yes, I can speak to it, and then Taha might want to add in some comments. So basically, it's about an operating budget for 1 year, and it's the rent for the rooms, the motel rooms, and it's also staffing. It's also training for staffing and support services where required, and also working in a community engagement with neighbors and other residents to make sure that information is actually communicated and engaged and shared with the community. Then on top of that is the next stage, which is us actually using the data, analyzing it, working with community connections and sector services to analyze our need and to help inform moving forward with a more permanent shelter. Taha, did you want to add anything?
Taha?
Yeah, just a comment to correct from before. The shelter services would and the surrounding programming would come into effect quite a bit quicker. It would be around end of May that we could see some of those spots being offered. Partially, well, mainly because this grant was, I mean, it was put out as part of the post-COVID recovery period effort that UBCM was forecasting, and that is looking to be more of a it's that COVID is going to be a relevant part of our lives for the foreseeable future. So it is kind of meeting the current need as well. The other part I'd say is that the programming that we developed was in partnership with a number of other organizations that had input and really will make this whole shelter well integrated in the current services in the community and well studied to support future action on emergency shelter.
Thank you. Any further comment, Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, I think the emergency shelter concept was developed for the winter months, 4 or 5 months of the year that we might need it. Now, are we going beyond that and creating a permanent? Is the idea to create a permanent facility?
Taha, Marianne?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Elliott, the temporary shelter was based on what they call emergency weather conditions. And this is different. This is actually year-round emergency shelter for residents within our community that the social sector is servicing. What they have been doing is allocating motel units when on an as-need base, and this would provide greater security because they can actually enter into a 1-year contract, which provides security and safety for the residents that are most vulnerable in our community. And that's why we have come up with the budget that it is, because Taha's consulted with the social sector and the providers so that we have the appropriate operating budget to do this on a 1-year basis.
Good. Thank you. Any further comment, Councillor Elliott?
No, I think it's quite a luxury. I'm just wondering, is this going to jeopardize any other funding stream we might need? I know the government is provincial and the federal government are creating programs, very significant programs, but does asking here jeopardize for something that we, in other things that we might need more so?
Through your worship, through your worship to Councillor Elliott, no, it would not jeopardize us moving forward. We're actually in discussions monthly with BC Housing, and we are looking at all sorts of programs that they're offering. And this, in fact, would help us put together the statistics and the needs to support moving forward.
And I'm just carrying on. I thought all this was done. I mean, didn't we have a study and a survey and a housing scenario all done, and so we know what we need, and we should be going towards the actual amenities that we do require?
Ms. Wade?
Your worship to Councillor Elliott, the motion that was done back on August 15, 2019, council put forward that we do more research to understand the need, because there was questions from the community and from council about the need, and it's very hard to get the data that you need to support emergency shelters or a temporary shelter. So this provides us with the opportunity to gather that. It's a very different housing needs analysis than what we did under the Dillon report, and it has been updated with the Rennie intelligence and will be further updated into the housing action plan.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Anything further? Any other comments, councillors? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. You're basically approving this so they can put the grant application in. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Taha. Thank you, Ms. Wade. Appreciate that. We're going to carry on to staff report 11B, Development Services. This is the request for the report on Westside Road, Jordan River, sensitive lands. So Ms. Wade, you have a report for council.
Yes, Your Worship, and I have a presentation, so I'm going to share my screen with you.
All right, thank you.
There. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes. Go ahead. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So before you today, at the last council meeting, council requested that we look at the opportunities for how we might be able to protect the lands in the Westside Road, Jordan River area, and the possibility of rezoning to parkland. So what we have done is prepared a report for you and a presentation. So I'm going to go through the background just in regards to the response from the Wildsight Revelstoke letter to just provide some information and background for council. I'm going to talk about the current protection measures that are in place and what lands are not protected, and talk about some council options so that you can direct staff as to what next steps you would like to do. On March 5th, we received this letter from Wildsight, and then on the 23rd, council passed the resolution that staff bring back a report at the next council meeting on options to protect the Westside Road and Jordan River area environmentally sensitive lands, including timelines, and to expedite rezoning to parklands. This included we had a discussion about the Westside Road gravel pit, which is a temporary license, and the protection of sensitive lands around the Jordan River. So I quickly just wanted to note that the Westside Road gravel pit came before council July 9th. Council did not support this. We made a series of recommendations to the province, including a needs assessment and environmental concerns. The province took our comments, and they required the applicant to actually have a community public meeting, which was held on January 28th, 2020, and provincial representatives were there. The outcome from that is that the province then issued a temporary license for 2 years, which will end this December 6, 2021. There's a list of conditions that the applicant must go through that were outlined. And once that information has been provided to the province and they've reviewed it, next steps will be undertaken. In discussions with the province, in your report, we have a statement from them. They have not currently heard from the applicant and are waiting to hear from them. And then if at the end of this period, there's been no steps moving forward, the province will relook at where this would go, but the term of that temporary license would end. Regarding the Jordan River Trail, staff gave a report. Council was supportive of that, and it was a referral from the Recreation Trails and Sites BC. Unfortunately, this application was not approved, so this trail is not formally designated by the province under Section 57, as noted in your report, and that this area remains as a environmental protection area under a Section 16 reserve that the province has over these lands, and no development is permitted. So where are we today? So what is currently in place on these lands of interest to council? So I'm going to walk you through the existing Crown tenures and explain where these are at. And then I'm going to identify those lands that are not protected under Crown tenures that may be of interest for us to move forward with. So the very first one, this is the land use disposal area, better known as the landfill. That is under a tenure with the province, and that would continue on. When it comes up in 2025, it'll be reevaluated and most likely just renewed with the province because these are rollover tenures. This license of occupation is for sand and gravel is coming to its end of life. It will expire in 2023. The applicants have already contacted the city in regards to reclamation and is working with the Ministry of Mines on how the reclamation plan will move forward with these lands. These lands are surrounded, and we also have a section 17 for the future technical park in this area. So those lands will be working to have the proper reclamation with the province on those lands, and what happens with those lands will be part of the section 17 consideration. This temporary license was the one I previously talked about with the Westside Road quarry. This is the one that will expire in December 2021, and the province is waiting for a response from the applicants. This license of occupation was actually issued in 2017. To date, the province is waiting to hear from the applicant. They have a 5-year period, which means in 2022, the province would go back to the applicants to see if they're actually intending on moving forward with it. We're not certain if the license to cut has been issued yet. We have reached out to the province on that to verify the status of that. But that piece I'll have to report back to council on. This section 17 is actually lands that the city has for the future technical park and is protected. A section 17 means that these lands cannot be disposed by the Crown lands because we have shown an interest in how we are going to use those lands. So they will consult with us. So those lands are protected from the point of view that they a disposition of Crown lands for gravel and gravel extraction. This area over here is the section 16 reserve that I talked about with the Jordan River. It goes all the way through the purple lands all the way up. So everything purple and within it is all protected under section 16 wildlife reserve. That is why the Jordan River Trail was not approved by the BC Recs and Trails to be a formalized trail. So these lands are protected in perpetuity for wildlife protection. So what do we have in our zoning right now? So in our zoning bylaw, you'll note that we have the RR60 lands. The RR60 lands are there for the retention of forest and wildlife lands as non-urban. There's a series of uses that are permitted, including parks, playgrounds, campgrounds, recreation facilities maintained on behalf of public agencies for public uses. And then there's also horticulture, farming, gravel, and other uses. So there's a bit of a conflict in some of those uses there. But it is designated with a zoning that will allow for parks and playgrounds, campgrounds, recreational facilities. The P1 is also another zone that we have, which is public use districts. P1, which is our parks and public use district. That P1 goes all along the buffer zone of the Columbia River, and both the P1 and the RR60 are over top of what the red area is, which is the very highly sensitive lands that has been of interest to council and is identified in our OCP. So what what it hasn't been protected? This area in here overlaps with the very high environmentally sensitive mapping. What is happening here is that we do have an urban reserve designation in the OCP, which acknowledges the environmentally sensitive areas. We do have an environmentally sensitive development permit in the area in here, so that any development would have to go under a development permit area. The OCP also acknowledges that when the OCP was adopted, that there's a need for implementation to do a Master's Parks plan, which is now underway, and that we needed further environmental mapping to inform updates to the zoning bylaw. The OCP acknowledges the need to create zoning that aligns with the highly environmentally sensitive areas, and that is something that is definitely on staff's workload in updating the zoning bylaw and getting the appropriate mapping through a QEP and natural assets. So we, in discussions with the province, we would need to work with them to secure approval for these lands as a park or environmentally sensitive via Section 17 reserve or a community license of occupation. Staff was fortunate enough to connect with the province this morning because they've been intermittently available. And we had a very good discussion about the Section 17 reserve. We have a fair amount of information that we could fill that application in and move that forward with the province. And that would be a shorter time frame than the community license of occupation. Any license of occupations are taking at least a year, where the Section 17 reserve would be roughly around 3 months. In addition, with the Section 17, because it'll be, we would have to say in our application why we were reserving it. I would be working with the Director of Community Economic Development and the Director of Parks and Rec on this in order so that we can collaborate on what does that plan look like for these lands, what is to be protected environmentally, what would be good for tourism and recreation, and what do we need from our parks master plan. And then we would form the appropriate zoning, because the 2 zones that we have right now for parks are they're great range, and they don't really deal with the environmental sensitivity piece, which is something that was identified to address out of the 2009 OCP. And we would have to get a QEP involved to help us with some of the terrestrial mapping, etc. So that leads us to the council's options. We've got 3 before you. And basically the first one is that you would request us to explore further with the province requirements for an application for Section 16, which is a complete withdrawal of the lands from deposition, which means they would be restricted for trail use or tourism and recreation. So we need to consider that in our community economic development strategies. That's why it's important for us to work with the Director of Community Economic Development on that, or Section 17, which is a conditional withdrawal from the disposition of land. So that allows us to take those out with the condition that we're going to move forward with a plan on what those lands are going to become. Very similar to what the Section 17 is currently on the tech parks, which is we need to take it to the next level and say, what is our plan for development there? And we would work with the province. Couple of things to bear in mind when we move forward. There's 3 other reserves that are on the lands in question. One is the Caribou Reserve, which is protected under the Section 16, and that is under the direction of the Caribou Recovery Group. And so we'd have to work with them. There's the BC Hydro Flood Reserve, which is also a Section 16, and we'd have to work with BC Hydro as well. And then there's also, with the Crown, they have it designated as a reserve for industrial uses in regards to, resources like gravel. So we would, moving forward, we do need to work with our partners to formulate a plan for how these lands would be developed and protected. So the other option would be an application for license for trails and parks, and we talked about that. Provincial representatives have reached out to us and asked what we might like to do with that. And we're going to move forward with a discussion with them as well to figure out what are the options for an alternative trail route. So basically the options before council are section 16, section 17, or a community license of occupation. The shortest one is doing a section 16 or 17, but section 16 would limit what we could do with those lands, whereas the section 17 would allow us to do the proper planning with community economic development and the director of parks to formulate what the plan would look like and get the appropriate environmental mapping that we need to identify those sensitive areas so that we can say those areas are protected, what areas are we going to allow trails in and parks, and is there other tourism uses that we need to consider. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm open to questions.
Sorry, just before we go forward with questions, there is a motion to receive for information. Someone want to put that on the table, please? Councillor Palmer. Seconded by Councillor Charlotte. We know what the motion is, just to receive it. So it's in our package. You're okay with me wording it that way, Mr. Palmer? Okay. All those in favor? Okay. And now, any questions from Ms. Wade to address some of the concerns that council has? So, Ms. Wade, as we talked throughout your reports, and we talked about the section 17 be the quickest way to deal with this. Of course, we know that there is going to be some costs and some staff time and that sort of thing, but the quickest way to get things on the board and what seems to be appropriate as far as the ministry, they're willing to work with you in that section 17 and seem to go forward with that. That seems to be the quickest way to kind of protect it, and then gives you the option, the staff and everybody, to work together moving forward. So I'm going to go to Councillor Brooks Hill and then Councillor Palmer.
First off, I appreciate the report. I already understood that the issue was complicated, but I failed to understand just how many layers there were there. I'm happy that you were able to actually talk to some of the ministry representatives, because that makes the options that much more real and gives us a better idea involving timelines and such, which can be hard to know when you're dealing with the province, or God help us, the federal government. So I'm curious to hear what the various other councillors have to say. I definitely think we should be pursuing one of these options. Which one is it? The section, the 17 reserve seems like a good option, in that it leaves us greater options going forwards as we get more information, and leaves greater leeway for public feedback, which I always like the idea of the public helping to shape these kinds of things. I'm still a little concerned with the timelines. I'm wondering if Ms. Wade could comment, if we were in the process of doing that, what might the province do if the applicant for the gravel pit submits their paperwork for a full occupancy?
Ms. Wade?
Through your worship, to Councillor Brooks Hill, they still have a series of things they will have to do. And I think that because of the other reserves that are there, the caribou, the hydro flooding, I think the province is looking at some of those things within what they're asking. And I think if they know that we have an interest in that land, that would help moving forward.
Great.
I can't speak for them.
Okay, good. Any further comment, Councillor Brooks Hill?
Not at this time, but I'm sure I'll have something else to say later.
All right, thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Thank you, Ms. Wade. Well done, the presentation, especially the verbal presentation with the slides was well articulated, a little bit easier than just the straight reading, and demonstrated the complexity. I have a couple questions and a couple comments, and like Councillor Brooks Hill, I'll have some more later on as other councillors weigh in. So on the entitlement for that area, for that gravel pit, the proposal. So they have the temporary use right now, and basically they have entitlement. There is a risk to that area. What I would say, a risk to that area of gravel extraction, which would be a travesty for our community. Is that correct? There is entitlement built in, essentially, so long as they meet all the requirements.
Through your worship to Councillor Palmer, they have to go through a process of actually meeting what the province is looking for before they would get a license of occupation. So this is only being issued to them to go through the analysis that the province wants. It doesn't say they have the tenure yet.
Correct. So, I'm just going to, Your Worship, so I'm just going to go back to what the community has said. The community, through that public meeting that was required, I didn't realize there was provincial officials there, but it was loud and clear that the community, including those that are proponents of gravel pits, it's loud and clear. The community does not want a gravel pit in this area. And, in the last couple of days, well, I think many of us, most of us have probably been through there. It is a beautiful, beautiful place that needs to be preserved for future generations. The confidence that I have that won't become a gravel pit is very, very, very low. Because the community was loud and clear. Council said we're object to this, and yet they gave them that temporary use. I believe they could go in and start doing their test pits with a little bit of paperwork. And so why would the province not just say, okay, this is a long-term use for gravel extraction, let's destroy this place? And so the urgency, and that's why I came in, quite forceful with this and saying we're at risk of losing this gem for our community. And so that's why the forcefulness. And I see that there's an opportunity to do things in parallel. I think based on the presentation that the Section 17 is probably the way to go, but we need to be doing more, council needs to be doing more to protect this land, to make it, to flag it to a higher extent so that the province, not only at the administrative side or the bureaucratic side, but from the political side, sits up and says, we better work at protecting this land. And so those are kind of my comments right now. I did spend in the last couple of days, I probably spent 4 hours in there, just a couple of comments. I'm not a QEP, qualified environmental professional, but the wildlife corridor in purple, there was signs of bear, there's certainly squirrel, there's eagles flying through that area on the purple that's on the screen right now. I also took the opportunity and spent probably two to 3 hours in the lands where the proposed gravel pit is. And every few meters, there's a big dump of moose feces. It's all the way through there. There was also, I could see that there was probably coyote, possibly cougar, I think it was coyote, deer. The habitat, the real habitat is all in that area. There is current, like fresh droppings and old droppings. It's a very special area in the wildlife. There's bear scratchings throughout the area. And when the gravel extraction, what's going to happen is that wildlife has to go somewhere else. And we're making it more and more difficult. Just a picture that I did today, down, this is the Jordan River. You can see Begbie in the background. This is right beside where that proposed, or right adjacent, I can't point on the map, but where the gravel pit is being proposed. It's a beautiful, beautiful area, and we need to do more to protect this. It's super, super important. This could be the most important legacy that we do in the remainder of our term. Thank you, Mayor Sulz.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Any other comments from other councillors? Councillor Sherlatt.
Thank you, Your Honor. I agree. I think this sounds like a huge opportunity for us to put a corner of our community aside for protection and smart tourism development potentially. Although if it is that much of a wildlife corridor, I'm happy to see Tourism Revelstoke keen on sustainable tourism, and so that as part of the planning process, we can look at that carrying capacity and make sure that any trail use is not interfering with the wildlife in the area. I agree. I think Section 17 sounds like the best of the options, where it gives us that flexibility to work with economic development and making some smart decisions for that area. But in the meantime, getting it set aside so that hopefully we don't see some major resource, or the resource extraction. I don't know if it's considered major or not, but the gravel pits going forward. So it'll be interesting to see how that moves forward. And hopefully if we can get a Section 17 done relatively quickly with this responsiveness from the province, then we can save this corner. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elliott, you have a comment or question? Your name's lighting up and flashing, so I thought maybe you had a question.
I'm sorry, no, Gary. I think it's all been said. I go out there quite often walking my dog. I'm not as poetic as Mr. Palmer there, just and as waxing on about how nice it is out there, but I do think it's important, and we could create something really special there. We could add to what's already in place and make it a center where an area that our community is very proud of. So we could do something worthwhile there.
Yeah, right. Good, thank you. Any other councillors with further comments? I think Councillor Palmer has nailed it. It's a very special area out there. A little concerned that the trails wasn't kind of, because it's in a riparian area, wasn't allowed to be protected, sort of thing. And so now we've spoken up about that sort of thing. They may want the trail moved at some point, but I don't want to speak for the government as to what their plans are as we move forward. We just know that we need to make sure that we keep that as pristine as possible as we move forward. So, Councillor Palmer, you had your hand up. You would like to make further comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Sulz. Just the point on that I was making with the wildlife activity in the gravel pit, proposed gravel pit area, is that was where the dominant wildlife, really where the trail is right now. My observation, again, I'm not a QEP, but my observation is that the wildlife corridor is very much, the real corridor is through the main lands, and that where the trail is right now is maybe the most appropriate, but that's a little bit of a red herring. However, there is this contradiction that it's okay to do a gravel pit, but it's not okay to have a trail. I mean, there's a super big contradiction there. Yep. Mayor Sulz, I do recognize and really super appreciate what staff has done. The parallel part, and it was in the resolution, was expedite for the rezoning to park. I have a motion to put on the table, and this would be in parallel to this other work. So my motion is that staff prepare a bylaw to rezone the land bordered by 1, the municipal boundary west and adjacent to the Jordan River, Westside Road, and the Jordan Mainline Forestry Road to P1 Parks and Public Use District for first and second reading for the April 27th, 2021 council meeting. If we get a seconder, I would like to speak to the motion.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Okay, Councillor Rind. Okay, Mr. Palmer, you want to speak to the motion?
So what council instructed last council meeting was on the expediting to protect. You know, all the stuff that's been presented by the director is super important in moving it along, because this would rezone it. In fact, was in Ms. Wade's report about the contradiction of the RR60 versus the P1 and the different areas in there. P1 is the strongest zoning protection tool that we have. I don't think it's strong enough even for this, but some of those other tools will be there. Arguably, this does not, we don't have jurisdiction over the province. The province still could proceed with allowing a gravel pit there, but this would be making a very, very strong statement to the province saying, don't allow a gravel pit in this area. It would be a very strong statement for us as council to the community saying, we care about this land. And it would be a strong message as we go through the Section 17 or one of these other tools that we can have more discussion on, but it would be help saying, we've already talked about the values for our community. We know that this is consistent with the OCP, and so the rezoning, I can see no reason that that this couldn't be forwarded. Could be done on the next meeting. We could have first and second reading. It doesn't become law at that point, but it sends that strong message, and it's a relatively easy. The bylaws are fairly straightforward for getting to first and second reading. And any objections and stuff will go through the public hearing, and we have third reading and adoption eventually to hopefully get to that point. But I really would like to get this to first and second reading so that we flag the urgency for all concerned. Thank you, Mayor Sulz.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer, for your comments. Ms. Wade, would you like to weigh in?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I just wanted to note a couple of things. The P1 zone versus the RR60, there's really not a lot of difference in the strength of the two. The P1 is Parks and Public Use District. It allows for assembly, cultural, recreation, bowling green, skating, all those things, fairgrounds, and in the rural residential, it actually limits to single-family dwelling. It talks about horticulture and farming, parks, playgrounds, campgrounds, recreation facilities. It does have airports and airfields in it, which you need federal transportation on. And it talks about wildlife uses for fishing and trapping. The intent of the RR60 is actually more for the retention of forest and wildlife, as it's noted. Yes, there is some conflicts in there, but if we spend staff time to rezone this to P1, I don't believe that it's going to get us the further strength we need. I think what we really need is to move forward with the Section 17 and get that application in. That is what tells the province that we have an environmental interest and a recreation and facilities interest in the tenure there, so that we can work with them about the disposition of the lands. Whether we have RR60 P1 on it, what we really need to do is get to the province and get the application in for the Section 17. And what we need to do is actually look at a zone that will do environmental protection, which is what was outlined in the 2009 OCP, and is really important that we work forward to get the appropriate environmental zoning and protection in place for those lands that will be identified in the terrestrial mapping by a QEP. So right now we don't even have the proper mapping. We know that there's a wildlife core there. It's in a PDF, but it is not GPSed. It's not mapped, and we need to hire a QEP to do that terrestrial mapping, which again was noted in the 2009 OCP as a piece of work that needed to be done, which is on our work plan as part of the OCP. So there's some key pieces that we need to do. in order to protect it. And I would suggest that staff's time is better spent getting the Section 17 in, getting that application in, and getting it processed with the province, and getting the appropriate framework for the appropriate environmental zoning, which is something that staff is wanting to do, so we can actually protect these lands appropriately.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Wade. I just want to ask a couple of questions just for clarification. So when we're talking about rezoning these lands, these are still Crown lands that we're just putting our designation on them, and we hope that they abide with that designation. Is that the intent of our zoning for these properties, or does our zoning hold water with them when we're talking about Crown lands?
So in our conversations with the province, the zoning is key to make sure that we have those lands protected. My concern is that we don't have the appropriate zoning to protect these lands. We need an environmental zone that is in line with the Water Sustainability Act and is properly mapped. And other municipalities have done these. I'm precedent in this. I was very involved with these at Whistler. So I have quite a bit of background in this. And that's what I really see as the urgent matters. We need to get the appropriate mapping, and we need to move forward with the appropriate zoning so these can be protected.
All right. Any further comments, Councillor Palmer? You have your hand up. And then Councillor Rind. You're muted, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. On the matter regarding RR60 versus P1, there is an important difference. P1 is the best environmental protection that we have. I agree with the director regarding we need a stronger zone, but this is the best protection that we have. And just for clarity, that some of the uses that are permitted is farming, trapping, resource extraction of raw materials, including preliminary grading, cutting, crushing of materials. This current zoning, the RR60, allows for gravel pits. It also allows for disposal sites and a whole host of things. P1, on the other hand, has some, there's some other uses that would be best not in there, but it is the strongest, and it talks about those environmental things. Yes, in RR60, you can have a park, but you can also have a gravel pit or a garbage disposal site or a farm or an airfield, a helipad or whatever it is. And so that's, and then again, as far as creating bylaws, preparing the bylaw for a rezoning, we do this over and over and over again. It's a fairly routine planning exercise. I understand of the implications that staff want to do the due diligence. This is, I'm saying, prepare if council agrees with this, it's preparing the bylaw. And if we get the first and second reading, it's even first reading. If we get first and second reading, it's giving a loud message, and there's plenty of time for all these other due diligence items. And so I think it's a critical piece to do in tandem. And I do not see this as an onerous exercise. And we've been at this for 2 years almost, and not really haven't done anything to really, there's been those little things, but it wasn't successful. They still got their temporary use. And so we need to go more aggressively in tandem with the items that the director's talking about, and then this more political side. Thank you, Mayor Sulz.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Councillor Rind.
Yeah, I would just say that, yeah, similar to what Councillor Palmer is saying, like, I don't see why these things have to be mutually exclusive. Like, why can't we just change the zoning, and then we can still have a QEP come in, we can still get the mapping done correctly, we can still get things to make sure they're compliant with the Water Sustainability Act. It's just like, this ensures it stays safe. I don't understand why we wouldn't do that.
Okay, thank you for your comment. So I'm going to go back to Ms. Wade, and I just want to ask the question, does this zoning P1 guarantee that it's going to be safe? And so, you know, I'm just asking that question to just kind of, not trying to say be the devil's advocate, but I want to make sure that we're kind of on the same page. So Ms. Wade, do you have comment on that?
Through your worship, no, it does not.
Okay. And so then we go back to if we were to say, let's go do the section 17 on there. You had a conversation with the environmental people today, or the ministry, and they seem to be receptive to that. Is that my understanding? Or am I putting the cart before the horse and asking that question? So.
Through your worship, no, our conversation with the province was encouraging, and they were encouraging us to put into section 17.
All right, thank you. Councillor Palmer, you have another comment?
So I don't want to go overly circling around this, but it's been brought up, and since you brought it up one more time, it's clear that does not guarantee. This is provincial land. They can do whatever they feel like with it, and we're just a creature, the municipality is a creature of the province. However, it sends a strong message, and just because we can't guarantee it, does that mean we do nothing? And politically, I'm saying, does that mean we do nothing? No, we need to do something, and work our hardest to preserve this by multiple levels. Then on the point about our confidence with the province and the ministry, once more, and I know it's repeating, that the province heard from our community. They heard from council and stabbed us in the back and gave them a temporary permit. I know they have to provide, do all the compliance, but they could have said no, and they didn't. So we need, and meanwhile, they're saying no to a trail. They're saying no to work with interested parties to look after that precious piece of property. Thank you, Mayor Sulz.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Any further comments from other councillors regarding the motion Councillor Palmer has put on the table, rezoning this property to P1? He's asking it be done within the next 2 weeks. I'm concerned that there's not going to be enough time, that something will fall off the table. But also, Ms. Wade, I'm going to come back to you and ask that. Is that potentially possible? I mean, we put bylaws through all the time about zoning and rezoning and that sort of thing. My question is it doable from your department's perspective?
Through your worship, currently we've already been backlogged from this last report, and we've already had to incur overtime to try to keep things moving forward. And I haven't been able to do the short-term rental that needs to be addressed. We have Downie Street, we have OCP, we have zoning bylaw. If I can strongly suggest that the best option we have is to put staff's time on the section 17 and get it in, because that's our best form of protection and sends the clearest message to the province.
So if we do a section 17 and we get that done, is that going to throw everything else off as well that you're working on in your department, or is it something that can be done fairly quickly?
This, according to the province, in my discussion this morning, the application is a one-pager, and I walked through the information that I have available. They have said to put that into the application and to submit it. So I feel fairly confident, given the work that we have done preparing this report and this presentation today, that we can then take that information and get to section 17 in, which would be the most prudent way for the community to move forward with how to work with the Crown on these lands.
Great. Thank you for your comments, Councillor Brookshill and Councillor Rind.
Yeah, just to follow up on that. So the submitting the application would be essentially step one. That sounds, relatively simple. And then I'm just curious. So then those other works you're talking about, the QEP, the mapping, etc., that would be to actually formalize it before the province would consider it? What is the application
process?
Yeah, like, so, you know, obviously a one-page document, the province isn't going to come back and say, okay, great, that's a section 17 on that land after a one-page document, I'm guessing, perhaps.
Great. Ms. Wade, further comment?
Through your worship to Councillor Brooks Hill, very good question, and thanks for asking that. So what happens with the section 17? It's conditional, so that means that it holds the lands for the city's interest based on what we want to do, which is go the next step, which is identify those environmentally sensitive lands, identify those wildlife corridors, work with the caribou recovery group, work with the water sustainability people to figure out where trails can go, parks can go, and if there's either economic benefits that the community economic development officer's looking at. So what it does is it secures those lands so that they won't dispose of them for gravel. And then what it does is buy us time to work through that plan and get all the appropriate studies we need to support it so that we can put into place the appropriate zoning. And I've already mentioned to the province about the various zoning and, you know, and how do we look at that and work with that. So it's very much an opportunity for us to collaborate and work and move forward to get what I hear council wants and the community wants.
Thank you for that comment. Councillor Rind.
Sorry, my hand was up, but that was not on purpose.
Okay. Councillor Elliott, you have comment?
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Is the goal to create a stronger zone than P1? I mean, once we do the QEP study and you know, the water assessment in the area, what's the end goal? Just to get a P1 designation anyway? Is that right?
Ms. Wade, could you weigh in, please?
Yeah, through your worship, Councillor Elliott, the whole point of the section 17 and holding it in that reserve is so that we can develop the zoning that will give us way more protection than a P1 or an RR60. And we don't have those right now. So as a planner, that's what we really would love to get, because we know that that's been on the book since 2009 and was identified as one of the implementation strategies. So that's exactly what we want to do. But in order to do that, we need the terrestrial mapping by a QEP so we can formalize that and create that zone. And then you decide, is there going to be a trail in there, for example, or not? And that's the issue that we had with the Jordan River Trail and why it was not approved, is because it is in a very sensitive riparian area. And the province is asking us, would you like to look at an alternative trail? And to let us know what you'd like to do. So it also will allow us the opportunity to look at the trail system in there and formalize something that isn't in that very high sense SPIA or riparian area, so that we can try to do a trail as well.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great recreation area. You know, it does have some wildlife. I think I don't know how rich it is in a real sense, but I mean, it was logged. It's close to the dump, but it's got a snowmobile tracks buzzing by and a logging area around it. So those are surrounding areas. So it's really a pocket that could be developed for our community, and that's ultimately what I think we have an opportunity for a dog park. We could have some trail network. We could do loop circuits. But if we go so detailed and create this narrow scope, I worry that maybe that's going to hamper us in what we really need.
Further comment, Ms. Wade, before I go to another councillor?
No, Your Worship, I think Councillor Elliott has raised the question that what we really want to do is get the appropriate zoning, and the section 17 will hold those lands if approved by the Crown. They're encouraging us to move forward and put in an application. And then we can, once that is established, then we can do the hard work we need to do to really do the appropriate protection on there.
Good. Councillor Charlotte, do you want to weigh in?
Sure, thanks, Your Worship. I see the point of wanting to make a strong statement about this area. It is obviously very important to the community. But I also appreciate the idea of making a stronger stance with a stronger environmental protection zone. And I think if we are actively working, as our staff have been talking about, and we've all been talking about quite loudly, is that part of this OCP process is cleaning up some of this mess that has not been actioned. Like this was on the task list back in 2009. Here we are in 2021, and we're getting to it, which I'm grateful for. And I would like to see that go full force ahead. I think there's a lot of tasks that would be nice to do, and if wishes were horses, we would all ride. But realistically, we need to be strategic on what we tackle and make sure that it's within the capacity of our team. I think that doing the Section 17 application makes sense. I am grateful that we got this report in this time. I think this is an important thing to move forward, but I'm not in support of the motion for the bylaw. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Palmer, one last comment.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. This council needs to decide whether we are the policymakers or staff are the policymakers. We need to discuss where the priorities are. And we might have some of that discussion possibly in camera. This is not a hard task, and it doesn't reject all the other aspects that the director talked about. There was a whole litany of things that need to be done. We need to do this with the QEP. We need to put the caribou and this and that. And we're saying this task is difficult. It's going to take away staff time. What about all those other things? And I think they need to be done. This is so important. And I really urge council, come on, get into the driver's seat and let's do something tangible. This is not going to protect it, but it's going to do a lot. Just for clarity, the conditions of use in a P1, no use shall be permitted, which is noxious, a nuisance, or otherwise undesirable because of noise, vibration, glare, smoke. On it goes on. This has far more protection than the RR60, far more protection. And it's important for us to show leadership on where we're going. A note that, according to the newspaper anyways, planning was all caught up on the backlog of development things. Now, what's the most important things for council? I know this is just one piece, but we've talked about it before, and this council only has a year and a half to get something done. What I was hearing there is, you know what, we're more likely to have a gravel pit. The end of that this year will come, even if the current applicant doesn't go in there, that gravel is gold for some other developer, and they're going to go in and come and also go through that exercise. If they don't take the license, it's so valuable for them. It's the dumbest place possibly in the whole Columbia Valley to be putting a gravel pit, but here we're still arguing about it. Let's move on it. Let's change the zoning. This is not difficult. And if it's difficult, please, Your Worship, let me finish. If it's that difficult, let's put a little bit of extra money. Let's take it out on some other little thing, and let's hire somebody that can get this done. It can be done very, very quickly. And let's do this protection. And then also with full-heartedly going with the director's recommendation of pursuing, making sure the Section 17 is the best way. And then let's pursue that. Let's get that moving. But let's get this rezoned to P1. There is a better zone that we don't even have in our toolbox right now. Yes, we'll get to that later, but let's put the best possible thing that we have in our toolbox right now. And then collectively, we need to be doing some lobbying at the political side. Let staff do the administrative stuff, work through that. And then we need action on this. I urge council to support this motion. Thank you, Mayor Sulz.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer, for your comments. A little concerned, almost like pitting council against staff. However, having said that.
Point of order, Your Worship. You did make comments that wasn't recorded at the beginning of regarding respect. I would suggest that there should be respect of that this is a council meeting and the debate should not be between the politicians and staff. Staff provide the information, and we need to have that debate amongst council members.
All right.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Your point is noted, Councillor Palmer. I am now going to ask the question. If you vote yes, you're voting
I have a
for.
comment.
Okay, Councillor Ryan.
Yeah, so what is the risk if we don't go to P1 and rezone it while this other application is being carried out and all these things are happening? What's the risk there?
Ms. Wade, any comment?
Through your worship to Councillor Ryan, I just want to make sure I understand your question. Could you just repeat it? You want to know the risk if we don't do the
given
P1?
Its current zoning and the fact that we have some gravel extraction that's on a temporary use and it could possibly be extended. Is it conceivable that other uses that fit within the RR60 might sneak in there before, we're able to get the Section 17 in place?
So they would have to apply to the Crown. The Crown would have to review it. They would have to do a referral. It would have to come to us and we would talk about it. So they're the owners of the land. The applications go to them and then they refer it to us. We have already parkland designation, and as you remember from the previous August 2019, we went through all our policies. We went through, because we have an urban reserve on there. We've got the environmentally sensitive DPs. So we had all that stuff, and the province took that forward and used it to form the requirements of the temporary license for that gravel pit. It is not approved as a gravel pit yet because they have taken all our comments into consideration.
Right. I guess I'm just worried that could happen again. There's nothing really stopping it. Whereas, as Councillor Palmer was mentioning, if it's P1, we still are able to do all those other things, but the uses are, we can at least have the uses be aligned with what's in our OCP. So it's a little bit more comprehensive, like our stance in the province's mind is a little bit more put together. So for that reason, I'm in support of the motion.
Thank you for your comment. Any further comments from other councillors? I'm not going to support go ahead, Councillor Elliott. You want to make a comment?
So just for clarity, the Section 17 pretty well stops any further development on this area. Is that right?
Ms. White.
That is correct, Councillor Elliott, and thank you for asking that question.
And it effectively allows us time to develop a comprehensive plan for that zone.
That is correct, Councillor Elliott.
So that whether it's zoned RR60 or P1, it's indifferent.
That is correct.
Thank you.
And if I could just say that I feel that as a professional, I need to say something. I'm not here to debate council. I have sat in your seats. I have been a city councillor. I'm here to provide you with my professional opinion under the code of conduct of a professional. So I'm not here to debate. I'm to give you my best advice. It is up to council to decide whether they want my professional advice as a professional planner or not. And I'm only here to provide you with guidance and the best advice that I can give. This is not a debate, and I take exception to that.
Great. Thank you for your comment. All right. Any further comments on the motion on the table? I was going to say I'm not in support of the. Go ahead, Councillor Palmer. Go ahead.
Appreciate the comments of Director Wade, and absolutely appreciate the work she is doing. Absolutely. And if there's any sort of conveyance of with my passion and absolute concern about the preservation of this parcel for our community, I apologize if that was misconstrued as in that sense. Your Worship, I just do have a couple of questions, just follow up to Councillor Elliott's. So the section 17, is there any guarantee that the province will issue that to the city?
Ms. Wade.
I can never speak for the province, just like I could never speak for council or others. But I do know that they are very supportive of this, and that I would feel very encouraged that we will move forward very positively. I can't put words into my mouth. That's an unfair question.
Another question, Councillor?
Yes. We've mentioned this before, but again, there was this confidence that the province might help us a year and a half ago. They failed on that. The other is that there's risk that we may talk about in camera, but there is a temporary use permit that's there right now, and there could be objection towards the section 17. Once again, this gives us another tool to put more weight later on in the future with the rezoning to P1. Thank you, Your Worship.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Okay, I'm going to now ask the question. I was going to make a statement before Councillor Palmer carried on with his questions. I'm not supportive of this motion to rezone. I am supportive of moving forward with a section 17. I think that's the most appropriate and the quickest way to get things done. I understand Councillor's passion, Councillor Palmer's passion, and I understand he wants to get things done so that the community can see that council's doing things. I totally get it. But at this point, I'm not supportive of that zoning. So I'm going to ask the question. Those in support of the recommendation to rezone to P1 at first and second reading, I believe that was the original motion. Please raise your hand. Okay, and those who are opposed, raise your hand. So we now have 3 of us on either side, so the motion is defeated. All right, we are now going to move on. Councillor Brooks Hill, you have a question.
I'm just wondering if we need a resolution to instruct staff to move forwards with the section 17. I trust Ms. Wade got that point, but.
Yep. So it would be good if we could have a motion if someone wants to put on that table. Councillor Elliott, seconded. Councillor Elliott, do you have a question or you're making that motion? Making the motion, you're muted, sir.
Sorry, Gary. Yes, I want to make sure that we're putting that motion on the table.
Okay, Councillor Elliott's making that motion, seconded by Councillor Brooks Hill. Any further discussion on the motion directing staff to do the section 17 on this piece of property? Seeing Councillor Brooks Hill.
I'm just wondering, would that include like the option 1 in the report is saying to come back with sort of timelines, costs for discussion? Or is that, would that be included in the motion or?
Well, it could be, but I think the important thing is to do the motion to do the section 17, and then we can follow up with other things because there's going to be costs associated with those. Am I correct with that, Ms. Wade?
Yes, Your Worship, you're correct. I think we have enough to get the section 17 in, and then we'll work with the province, and then we'll come back with what our next steps would be with the plan and any costs. But right now, I think we have enough to get this in and get this moving forward. And I would make this a priority of staff because I know it's of great concern to the council and to the community. And I don't foresee this taking us that long.
Okay. Councillor Palmer, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Yeah, I just had questions on one of the problems with motions like this a little bit on the fly is ambiguity. So I think it was partially answered, but the timelines of when we would expect to hear something back, and also what would the director anticipate that time a realistic time that the province, should they be willing to issue this, when would we, what would be the earliest date that we would see that, and what would be the realistic date that they would actually issue the Section 17?
Ms. Wade, any comment?
The province has informed me that once they receive the application, that would take approximately 3 months to process and review. And that's what they've told me.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further comment on the Section 17? Seeing none, I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on. Thank you for your time, Ms. Wade. I know that you've put some overtime into this report, but I appreciate the fact that you were able to get this done. We're going to move on to item 11C, the grant and aid applications. So that's in front of you. Councillor Rind and myself sat down with the Director of Finance and went over these and came up with the following list. And so I'm going to ask someone to put on a motion, unless you have questions, but I'll get the motion on the table first, that the grant and aid applications be approved. Someone want to put that on the table for me, please? I'm just seeing hands, so I see Councillor Elliott, Councillor Brooks Hill. Any discussion on the grant and aid? Councillor Palmer, you still have your hand up. Do you have a question regarding those? No? Okay. No, thank you. Any other councillors with questions on the grant and aid applications? Okay, I'm going to ask the question. All those in favor, please raise your hand. It's approved unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for your time on that. Moving on to item 11D, Parks, Recreation and Culture Public Art Policy Amendment. So can we put the motion on the table, and Ms. Donato's here if you have any questions. Councillor Brooks Hill.
The Public Art Policy PRC-3 be approved as amended.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Sherlett. Any questions for Ms. Donato, councillors? You want to give us just a brief overview, Ms. Donato, regarding this amended policy?
Thank you, Your Worship. Basically, the Public Art Committee reviewed the policy, the locations identified in the policy, and has suggested that the area in the vicinity of the 4th Street roundabout, between the actual roundabout and the 5th Street pedestrian linkage, would be a suitable area for a public art installation. So accordingly, they've proposed to amend the policy as presented.
Great, thank you. Any comments on that policy so that we can get art in that area of town? Councillor Elliott.
Actually, no real question on the new addition, but I was just wondering about the alleyway, the art that goes into the alleyway. That's not on the list. Is that something that's been missed?
Ms. Donato.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Elliott, the art galleries project is temporary art installations. They're not meant to be permanent, and it is probably something that we need to look at the policy and incorporate somehow, so I can bring that back to the committee for further suggestions.
All right. So the motion on the table dealing with the approval of the art policy amendment for permanent art. All those in favor? Opposed? Everybody's approved it. Thank you. So move forward. Parks and Recreation and Culture, the public art selection for Kate Tupper's art piece. Someone want to put that motion on the table, please? Councillor Sherlett.
Yeah, the Public Art Committee's recommendation to move forward with a lease of Carbon Key by artist Kate Tupper for installation in the planter box in front of City Hall be endorsed.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Brooks Hill. Any discussion on the motion? This is a nice piece of art, and Kate Tupper, I believe, lives in the Cusp and has done some artwork here in the community, but also has done some manufacturing of our new ferry that we have down south as well. So I'm definitely supportive of this beautiful piece of art going in that planter box. Any other comments from councillors? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to correspondence, BC Housing press relief, Revelstoke affordable housing. It's nice to see this project coming to fruition. Councillor Brooks Hill, do you have any comment? Do you sit on that affordable housing?
Well, no, I'm just really excited to see the project going ahead, and hopefully around this time-ish next year or a little bit later, there'll be people moving in there.
That's pretty awesome. Yep, great. Community Housing Society affordable housing at 420 Downie Street. We're starting to see some movement with that. I know the Housing Society is quite concerned, as are many residents, about let's get the project rolling. Any comments or Councillor Brooks Hill?
I know that, as you said, so it's the Housing Society, but also together with a number of other organizations are very as noted in the letter that signed on to this letter. And I believe they were hoping for some sort of show from council that this was a priority. And I hesitate a bit, given that how many things council says is a priority right now for our planning department. But I really feel that this project should be a priority. And I understand that, things take time with BC Housing, and that the ball's not really in the city's court right now, is my understanding. But I just want to make it clear that I think, I don't want to speak for all of council, but I think all of council feels that this project is hugely important, and that once BC Housing is ready to bring it forwards, that we want to see this be moving forward as quickly as possible.
I totally agree. Thank you. Ms. White, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just wanted to echo Council Brooks Hill's comments, and I want council to know that we meet monthly with BC Housing, and we are been involved with this application. And I know that BC Housing has put in to be a delegation at our next council meeting, and we'll be providing an update to council as well, and that they've already contacted us in regards to the application requirements. So we have been working with them for at least a year now on this application, and helping them through our process.
Great. Thank you for that. Any further comment on that Housing Society? Okay, Councillor Elliott, your hand is up. Do you have a comment or a question, sir?
I'm sorry, Your Worship, that was a mistake.
All right.
My hand is down.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving on to Community Economic Development, Social Development Committee minutes. Councillor Rind, any comment on those minutes? None? Okay. Any comments from any other councillor? Moving on, Finance Committee minutes, which is just what we went through with the grant and aid. So no comment. Public Art Committee minutes. Councillor Charlotte, you sit on that. Any comment on those minutes? We just went through all that. Okay. Youth Advisory Committee minutes. Ms. Donato, any comments on that?
Through Your Worship, just an update on the monthly report. It happened so long ago. We hired a new youth liaison contractor who will be starting in September of this year. And she will be at the first meeting to be held next week.
All right, thank you for that. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, Revelstoke Accommodation Association, short-term rental policy. That's more for our reading file. Definitely we hear what they're saying to us. So we want to make sure that that's passed on regarding our short-term rental policy as it comes forward to council as well. So any further comments from any other councillor? Mr. Palmer, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Yeah, just further to the presentation earlier, I think there was some clarification, at least for me. I was a bit surprised that they seem to be supportive of the broad vacation rentals, conditional on that the owner be part of that. So I think we went to just first reading, and I'm sort of wondering when we expect to see that back for a second reading. Is that in the work plan?
So at this point in time, anything, Ms. Wade or Ms. Lowe?
Your worship, it was not brought back yet for first reading, so that was what we were looking at. However, with council's concerns, Ms. Wade is looking at different situations to bring forward for direction, because the direction that we did bring forward was not accepted by council. So we're putting together some other research that Marianne has done, and she'll be bringing that forward to council. It was to be coming at the end of April. However, it looks like it will probably be pushed to the beginning of the May with some other issues that have come forward. But Ms. Wade can speak to it if she'd like.
Ms. Wade, any comments?
Through your worship, Ms. Lowe has captured it. We're going to come back with council after everything we've heard from the last discussion and lay out a bunch of information and options for council to consider so they can direct staff appropriately, and then we can prepare bylaws as required.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from councillors? Seeing none, Ms. Floyd, do we have any questions from the press?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute. No, we do not.
All right, so we're going to move forward. I would like to go in camera pursuant to 90.1A and all the other letters that Councillor Palmer had put forward. So someone want to make that motion, please. Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Charlotte. All in favor? Motion's carried. We're going in camera, and we're going to take a few-minute break here before we come back. Thank you.